Celebrating 48 years on the air, award-winning Farmweek is a production of Mississippi State University Extension.
Today on Farm Week, a follow-up on that dangerous water weed in central Mississippi. More on how it came to life. Plus, another update on bird flu. Turns out it's moved to more species than we thought. In Southern Gardening, Eddie takes us on a trip to Hawaii. Well, kind of. And in our feature, rebuilding the American clothing industry with Mississippi cotton. Farm Week starts right now.
Hello everyone, I'm Zach Ashmore.
And I'm Mike Russell. Once again, thanks for joining us here on Farm Week. Last week we brought you the story of a noxious water weed discovered in a private pond in Noxapater, Mississippi, and the use of drones to help eradicate it with the help of MSU Extension and the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks. This week, as promised, a follow-up. More on how giant salvinia came to light and more about how drone technology is helping and evolving thanks to research being done in part by groups like MSU's AAI, the Ag Autonomy Institute. Toward the end of this report, you'll hear more from its Associate Director, Madison Dixon.
If this will stop it, this will save the state of Mississippi millions of dollars and an ecological disaster. So hopefully, our agents out there will keep this in mind and be the boots on the ground and the eyes for people like MDWFP and our specialists on campus. They can't be in 82 counties, but us county folks are. There's no competition between Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks and Extension. We work together. We have the same mission statement. That's to serve the people of the state of Mississippi with technical and educational advice. And that's what we're going to do. So I am so happy to have MDWFP collaborating with this to help give this landowner some technical advice and helping them find an aerial applicator, because this is a sensitive site that we're at. This is very sensitive. We're 2.5 miles from the Pearl River, which is going to feed into the reservoir. It's 900 feet from the WMA, so it's a very sensitive site. This is one of those cases where the old Marines had a slogan back in World War II that said, "We'll put you eyeball to eyeball with the enemy." But we're not talking about the enemy here, but the extension will put you eyeball to eyeball with the clients, and that's what we do, and that's just about the way it happens.
The most important thing with aquatic vegetation, especially invasive species, is proper identification. If you see something that you're not sure of, let somebody know. This project was made possible by the Mississippi State Extension Service, their agent in Winston County, Mr. Jim McAdory. He came out on a technical assistance visit, determined what he was looking at, got in touch with the appropriate folks with the Mississippi State Extension Service who got in touch with us. And in conjunction with the Extension Service, MDWF&P is providing the technical guidance on site. We rely a ton on our county agents as well as the general public. On getting tips, getting information, and things like that. They know their landowners, like I've said. They work with them every day. They're the first line when it comes to something like this. And then the extension experts at Mississippi State, Dr. Wes Neal, Dr. Gray Turnage, played a huge part in this as well.
We're just proud to have the folks here to help us out. The folks with the Mississippi Department of Wildlife and Fisheries and Parks. Frankly, I think they've done a super job over on the Ross Barnett Reservoir and that Pelahatchie area there, and they are doing the same thing here. Of course, we're helping a little bit with it, but the big thing is man, it would just been awfully hard for us to have done this with even with 25-gallon sprayers. From what I've seen here, they've done a fantastic job. I don't know what Mississippi would do without them, just to be honest. Now, I know that may sound like a Mississippi State guy bragging, but my expertise is civil engineering and not in this particular field, but it makes me real proud of what they do.
We've got to be able to also have other means for being able to still leverage this technology, maybe where GPS isn't as great as it is in most locations, or is potentially not as available, period. And so in those cases, there's things like stereo vision, technology through depth cameras. There's also LiDAR, which is light detection and ranging, which can be a very effective means of not only navigation but also data collection in and of itself. So all of that to say that you're exactly right. GPS is a key enabler of being able to use these drones for multiple different missions, but there's also times when GPS coverage or GPS connectivity might not be as great as we need it to be. And particularly when those are in rural locations, we still want to be able to use the drone technology to do the things that we want it to do and provide the benefits that it can. So AAI is invested in trying to also enable the operational benefits there when your GPS or other traditional technologies maybe aren't as readily available.
You know, you see a typical farm show, it's going to have, you know, people in boots and farmers, and now we go into these farm shows, and it'll be, you know, kids with you know, that are just straight technology guys. You know, they may have come from a family that farms, but they wouldn't have gotten back and been boots on the ground, but these drones are offering them an opportunity to get back on the farm, and either whether it's surveillance or spraying or scouting crops, there's a lot of opportunities for these kids now that have always liked technology. So I do believe that they're empowering rural America through them. I mean, I think it's going to add a whole layer of opportunities for people in the farming industry.
In other news, we continue to update the ever-evolving story of highly pathogenic avian influenza, otherwise known as bird flu. Turns out, bird flu seems to be moving in more ways than researchers thought. Peter Tubbs looks at one lab in the middle of it all.
Research into the highly pathogenic avian influenza virus that crossed from birds into the nation's dairy herd continues at the National Animal Disease Center in Ames, Iowa.
This avian influenza virus, which would normally stay in birds, has gone into more than 20 different mammalian species, more than 100 times in 2 years. So this group of viruses don't know exactly what it is, but it has the capacity to cross the species boundary.
The NADC confirmed earlier this year that the virus passed from cow to cow via the mammary glands during milking. Current research is exploring if there are other routes the virus can pass between dairy animals.
We do not know nearly enough about how this virus is transmitted among animals. That's why what we're doing right now is really important. So we are evaluating the spread on milking equipment, but then we definitely need to consider some other avenues too.
The USDA has confirmed 197 cases of HPAI across 14 states in 2024, including 17 new cases in the last 30 days, led by 5 in Colorado. Researchers at NADC have also begun the initial phase of testing of a vaccine for avian flu in dairy cattle. The vaccinated animals are now being tested for an immune response generated by the vaccine.
On the lighter side, feel like a little Hawaiian paradise? Who doesn't, right? Thanks to Eddie Smith in this week's Southern Gardening segment, it might be a little easier to go tropical than you think.
Southern Gardening is back at the MSU Branch Experiment Station in Poplarville, Mississippi, admiring a beautiful variety of colocasia, commonly known as elephant ear. Let's take a closer look at this plant. The Royal Hawaiian Waikiki colocasia is a captivating ornamental plant, renowned for its lush, tropical allure. Its large, heart-shaped leaves are a true showstopper, displaying an extraordinary variegation of colors that mesmerizes onlookers. The foliage boasts a rich tapestry of deep emerald green, creamy ivory, and striking burgundy, with each hue blending seamlessly yet standing out distinctly. The leaves are adorned with intricate, colorful patterns and bold splotches, giving each one a unique and enchanting appearance. The texture of the leaves is equally fascinating, with a smooth, glossy surface that catches and reflects sunlight, enhancing the vibrant colors. As the plant matures, its robust stems provide a sturdy foundation, allowing the foliage to unfurl and expand, creating a dramatic umbrella-like canopy. This elephant ear thrives in warm, humid environments, making it an ideal choice for adding a touch of exotic splendor to gardens, patios, and indoor spaces. Whether placed in a garden, a decorative container, or an indoor planter, the Waikiki colocasia brings a sense of tropical paradise to any setting. I'm Eddie Smith, and I will see you next time on Southern Gardening.
We'll take a break right here, but don't go away. Coming up in our Farm Week feature, rebuilding the American clothing industry. In the early days, Americans made their own clothes. Then, 150 years ago, the apparel industry boomed. But more recently, a severe slide and a low point with COVID. Now, are things turning around? We'll visit two companies where hope springs eternal thanks to a resurgent and Mississippi's prized crop, cotton. Putting our pants back on. That's coming up on Farm Week. Don't go away.
I believe in people and their hopes, their aspirations and their faith. I believe that education, of which extension work is an essential part, is basic in stimulating individual initiative, self-determination, and leadership. I believe that these are the keys to democracy, and that people, when given facts they understand, will act not only in their self-interest, but also in the interest of society. I believe in intellectual freedom to search for and present the truth without bias and with courteous tolerance towards the views of others. Because I believe these things, I am an extension professional.
I believe in people and their hopes, their aspirations, and their faith. I believe in intellectual freedom to search for and present the truth without bias and with courteous tolerance toward the views of others. I believe that education is a lifelong process, and the greatest university is the home. That my success as a teacher is proportional to those qualities of mind and spirit that give me welcome entrance to the homes of the families I serve. Because I believe these things, I am an extension professional.
Time for the market report. Prices back on the downswing.
Except in the main row crops, that would be corn, soybeans, and wheat. And we'll get into it. But first, the numbers. What were the week's biggest gains and losses? And then, with cattle prices fluctuating, what's moving the markets there? And finally, with beans and corn moving up, how long will it last? We'll take a closer look. So, markets closed the week back on the downswing. Corn, beans, and wheat still in the green while livestock falling. Let's take a look. The week's biggest gain, lumber up 23.5 bucks, nearly a 5% increase from the previous week. The week's biggest loss, soybean oil, down more than 2 cents, and that's a 5.25% decrease from the previous week. So, cattle prices still going down, but slowly. It's not been a dramatic shift so far, and the herds are still recovering. So, what's the cause? Extension livestock economist Josh Maples says it's all about volatility.
Something that is interesting considering all of these good cattle news that we've had recently. Yeah. However, cattle prices themselves have kind of declined a little bit over the past few weeks, despite having a few ticks up here and there. So what's the cause of that decline?
Yep, I would narrow it down to two particular things. One is just volatility in markets, and this is especially true for the feeder cattle futures market or the live cattle futures market. We've seen pretty significant volatility in that futures trading, really, over the past 2 or 3 weeks. So we've saw some big drops. We've seen some ticks back up. If we look at the cash prices, so the prices that producers are receiving whenever they go sell their cattle at stockyards, we have seen prices tick down just a little bit. Some of that, Zach, I really do think is seasonal. September and October are typically our lowest seasonal periods in terms of prices. If you look at average prices throughout the year, October is usually our lowest month, and then September is the second lowest month. It's because that's when we sell most of our calves. If you're looking at these calves that are getting weaned and going to the stockyard, the big fall run, I think we're going to see more of that seasonal impact this year. We didn't see it at all hardly last year. Last year, prices just went up throughout the year. This year, it seems like we're going to see some of that seasonal pressure to where we actually do see a dip in prices in September, October. I'm not convinced it's this fundamental shift towards lower prices. Supplies are still really tight. So I don't yet think we're heading towards a overall lower price environment. I do think it's just kind of a disruption that we're going through right now because of volatility and seasonal patterns.
In our row report, corn, soybeans, and wheat futures still trending up. So what's that cause? Well, this year's harvest off to a rough start, according to the USDA Crop Progress Report, and a market analyst weighs in from the technical side.
In the top 18 corn-producing states, denting is reported at 74%, slightly lower than last year. Maturing is at 29%, the same as last year. Condition shows 64% reporting good or excellent. In the top 18 soybean-producing states, setting pods is at 94%, the same as last year. Dropping leaves is at 25%, slightly lower than last year. Condition shows 52% reporting good or excellent. With this context, market analyst Ted Seifert talks about how things look from a trader's perspective and what's likely to come.
We're currently roughly 5 million metric tons behind where we were this time last year on our new crop export sales. The USDA has the exports increasing by 150 million bushels, so that means we're about 9 million metric tons behind where we need to be to hit the USDA's number. So we need to average about 1 million metric tons better than last year each week, so somewhere in the twos. And that's a growing concern for me. I think without a major problem in Brazil, it's going to be a very big struggle to get to the USDA's target. And the USDA is already projecting well over 560 million bushel carryover. So the soybean story, in my opinion, I think is getting more and more bearish, while the corn story is getting a little bit less bearish. But I'm really worried about what happens for soybeans here, not only into harvest lows, but also how the planting mix and the jockeying for acreage is going to go, because I think soybeans should be the big loser. I think corn is the bigger winner going into the end of the calendar year, going into planting. Corn, I think, can still buy some acres, right? It really, I think, needs to. And 420 corn, 430, 440 corn doesn't really get us all excited because interest rates are high, although it could be coming down. Inputs are still high, right? So what does corn have to do to really get the acres that it needs? And so I, again, am optimistic for corn, but to some extent, I think the soybeans, while rising tide may lift all ships, soybeans, in my opinion, really should lag behind, unless there's a major problem in Brazil.
And that's it for a deeper look into the markets. We seem to be in a flux right now, too early to harvest to see what's to come, while livestock looking for something to hang on to. Mike?
Thanks, Zach. With all the turmoil in the economy and the relentless tug of war in trade, it's easy to understand why some industries have nearly flatlined, American clothing manufacturing among them. But there is a small reason for hope, and Mississippi cotton could play a role. Colleen Bradford-Krantz has more.
In the early days of the nation's history, most clothing worn by Americans was made at home. Mass manufacturing of clothes didn't take off until the late 1880s, rapidly growing into a booming industry centered in New York City. Apparel companies soon began to crop up elsewhere, including in distant rural communities with a nearby supply of cotton or with other industries whose workers needed certain types of clothing.
We started in 1903 Shawnee, Oklahoma was a big railroad town at the time. It had two different railroads, the Rock Island and the Santa Fe railroads both met here. And the railroad workers needed something to wear, and so we got started by producing jeans for the railroad workers to wear.
In recent decades, however, the once thriving U.S. clothing industry has undergone a disheartening historic shift. 30 years ago, there were more than 741,000 production employees below the level of supervisor. That number has since slid over 92%. The job count hit a low point during the COVID pandemic, with just 49,100 apparel workers in April of 2020.
Apparel manufacturing in the United States has always been important for rural America, and it's something that probably reached its high point in the 1960s and 1970s. And since then, we've really been losing a lot of apparel factories, the majority of them.
However, there is reason for cautious optimism. Other than that dip during COVID, the industry's apparel manufacturing employment levels may have begun to level off in recent years, hovering around 65,000. What has been left behind is a kind of camaraderie among those who survived a period when most clothing manufacturing moved overseas.
The industry for American-made products probably is growing more and more amicable. More and more people see it as something that we want everyone to thrive in. And so probably in the 60s and 70s, you had a lot more competition where people were fighting and actually trying to steal sales from other people. But we think it's great when anybody that makes something in the United States has sales, and we want to encourage other people to start a company.
Today, over 98% of the clothing sold in the U.S. retail market is imported, the majority from Asia. Roundhouse, which has about 30 employees, survived by keeping expenses carefully under control. The company, which David Antosh owns with his father and brother, made it a priority to keep their American-made jeans and overalls affordable. They sell over 100,000 pairs of jeans annually, using 100% American-grown cotton. They don't advertise, and the owners can often be found working on the factory floor.
We have employees here who have spent their lives working here and know how to make jeans as quickly and as efficiently as possible, because our whole goal is to make affordable American-made jeans. We try to keep everything here at $59.
Roundhouse has found that consumers are seeking out American-made clothing as it becomes harder to find. Over 90% of the company's international sales are done in Japan, where customers are willing to pay for the heavier denim and the attention to detail. 700 miles to the north, Fox River Mills in northern Iowa continues to manufacture its socks and other apparel in the community of Osage, which has a population of about 3,500.
Fox River Mills is the oldest operating sock mill in the United States. It was founded 120 years ago along the Fox River in Appleton, Wisconsin, and ended up here in Osage, Iowa. Continually operating, never stopped, didn't stop for any of the major events that we've seen throughout our history, continued to knit products. So I'm very proud of that heritage, for sure.
Warren says their niche market of specialty and high-quality socks, ranging from military to high-tech to casual, as well as knitting products for other companies, has helped them survive.
With the globalization of trade and trade agreements and the impacts of those through the 80s and 90s, we saw that filter offshore, and you fast forward to today, I think maybe only 3% or somewhere in that range is apparel is manufactured in the United States. So dramatic change, certainly a global economy, certainly a competitive open market for the most part.
Fox River relies on the town and surrounding area to keep their 170-person workforce strong as they turn out 5 million pairs of socks annually. In turn, the town counts on those Fox River jobs to help keep the area economically viable.
A lot of apparel manufacturing started in small town America, and you see a lot of that in the Southeast. Through Alabama, the Carolinas, you see small town America with manufacturing plants that sustain those communities and sustain those families for many, many years. Some towns that still have manufacturing, but it's just a fraction of what it used to be.
Both Roundhouse and Fox River struggle to find experienced workers in rural areas with smaller populations. However, smaller communities do provide some marketing benefits.
One example would be our knit in Iowa is really the moniker that we claim. We're made in the USA and we're knit in Iowa, and we're very proud of that heritage. And you can create, an identity, which we have over the course of many decades, that connects and resonates with many consumers.
Both companies are hopeful due to the hint of a small resurgence in U.S. apparel manufacturing.
It's not huge, but you're seeing a lot of smaller entrepreneurial operations that are coming into, in some cases, abandoned locations that still have old equipment, and renovating that equipment and establishing brands and establishing a brand proposition around specialty.
And should the U.S. apparel industry continue to grow stronger, Fox River and Roundhouse expect to be right there pushing the needle for another 100 years.
So not all the news is good news, but there is hope for a continued resurgence, and Mississippi will certainly play a role in that growth. Well, next week, a water program that's good for the environment and helps farmers make more money.
It's a certification program in Minnesota that incentivizes farmers to protect their most valuable resource, water. Of course, farming is a balancing act, but this program helps farmers optimize their operations in a way that they usually wind up more profitable. And that's a win-win in everyone's book.
Farmers taking water quality to the next level. That's next time on Farm Week.
Remember, if you missed a story, look for past episodes of Farm Week on our website at farmweek.tv.
And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and YouTube. See you next week. Thanks for watching.